And welcome back to Hannity. And tonight we are talking about two scandals involving matters of life and death. And as we continue our investigation into Fast and Furious, it's important to remember that this reckless program resulted in the murder of Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. Now, Agent Terry was gunned down in December of 2010 by a weapon linked to the Fast and Furious program.
On the night of December 14, 2010, Border Patrol agent Brian Terry was part of a small elite tactical team working to track rip crews in the darkness near Peck Canyon.
Agent Terry's WARTAC team infiltrated on foot into an area off down this canyon, and they set up an interdiction zone of a known narcotics trafficking and rip crew trail. Keep in mind that Brian and his WARTAC team of special operations operators were working in the dark of night. This is truly rough terrain.
They soon encountered a group of at least 5 men, each armed with automatic weapons. A fierce shootout ensued.
In the end, one Mexican national, a member of a rip crew, lay wounded, and Brian Terry was dying.
Last night, Border Patrol agent Brian A. Terry was shot and killed in the line of duty as he encountered several suspects near Rio Rico, Arizona.
Brian Terry's life of service to God, family, country, and Corps is a life well lived.
Our stronghold along that border was Agent Terry's final stand.
It doesn't get easier, I will tell you that. I do not relish, as a chief of the Border Patrol, handing out folded American flags to surviving family members.
It was to have been Agent Terry's last night of work before going home to Michigan for a Christmas vacation.
Brian did ultimately come home that Christmas. We buried him not far from the house that he was raised in just prior to Christmas Day.
There are times when you just can't hold back the tears because it's like losing a son. It's like losing a nephew. And I truly felt like a true son of the United States of America, WARTAC and the Border Patrol, was lost that night.
At the scene of the shooting, agents arrested Manuel Osorio Arianos and recovered 3 AK-47 type assault weapons. 2 of them had been purchased in Arizona by a man named Jaime Avila, who was under surveillance as part of the Fast and Furious operation. Avila was arrested the next day.
Ms. Terry, when did you first hear about the weapons being purchased through the Operation Fast and Furious?
Mostly on TV, the media, newspapers. I never really got a call until it was brought out in the newspapers. I just was flabbergasted. I didn't believe it at first.
Ballistic tests could not identify the murder weapon, but lawmakers were outraged.
Brian Terry's loss was preventable. It was regrettable and preventable.
What makes Brian's death so shocking to his family is that he did not die on a foreign battlefield. He died not in Iraq or Afghanistan, but in the desert outside of Rio Rico, Arizona, some 18 miles inside of the U.S.-Mexican border. His killers were not Taliban insurgents or Al-Qaeda fighters, but a small group of Mexican drug cartel bandits heavily armed with AK-47 assault rifles.
And so the family is not just left to grieve, but also to look for answers.
Every one of the men and women who were involved in Fast and Furious, you can say with absolute certainty, based on my experience, are men and women of good faith, men and women who wanted to do the right thing. But they hadn't fully thought about the consequences of their actions here. And that inability to look into the future, to understand the risks that they were taking, is their downfall. And maybe, although we don't yet know, the reason for Brian Terry's tragic death.
And joining me now from Las Vegas with more on this tragedy is someone who has spent countless hours investigating the matter. She's the author of Fast and Furious, Barack Obama's bloodiest scandal, and the shameless cover-up. Katie Pavlich is back. Katie, welcome back to the program. It's very sobering to see that. Explain why you call this Obama's bloodiest scandal and shameless cover-up.
Well, I call it the bloodiest scandal because we're dealing with literally hundreds of lives south of the border and the murder of Brian Terry in this case as a result of Operation Fast and Furious, something that President Obama is willing to stand in full faith and confidence next to his Attorney General to defend. He claims he knew nothing about it, despite the White House having its fingerprints all over this. Multiple national security advisors were informed about Operation Fast and Furious. Eric Holder has changed his testimony multiple times under oath in front of Congress. It took him nearly a year to apologize to the Terry family, and the only reason he apologized was because he was embarrassed in front of Congress by Senator John Cornyn when he was asked whether he had been in contact with the family, and he said no. And then he leaked the apology to the press before the family had a chance to actually read it.
Why not just get to the bottom of it so something like this could never happen again? Why not just be forthcoming about it and say, okay, our intentions were this, it didn't work out right, innocent people were hurt. Why not just admit the truth?
Well, because they have a lot to hide, and that's one question that I would like to see asked of the Attorney General under oath. What do you have to hide here? This administration has been acting guilty instead of innocent since the beginning, and you look at all the evidence and it's compiled, and this operation was not only stupid, but it also had a very sinister anti-Second Amendment agenda behind it. And the Justice Department was willing to use humans as collateral damage to push this unpopular policy around Congress and behind the backs of the American people. And Brian Terry lies in the wake, and hundreds of Mexican citizens do as well.
All right, Katie Pavlich, thanks so much for being with us.